Most people think the education system is broken. And they are right. But not in the ways they usually mean. They think it is broken because of funding, because of teacher quality, because of curriculum design, because of standardized testing, because of the politics that surround every attempt to fix it. All of those things are real, all of them matter, but none of them is the deepest problem. The deepest problem is something more fundamental, something that has been true since the beginning of formal education, and that no amount of funding or curriculum reform or policy change has ever been able to fix. The system teaches everyone the same thing, at the same pace, in the same way, regardless of where each individual student actually is, regardless of what they already understand, regardless of where their specific gaps are, regardless of how they best learn, regardless of what they genuinely care about, regardless of what they are actually ready for. The system presents information at a fixed pace for a constructed average student who does not exist, and every real student who is ahead of that pace in some areas and behind it in others, who learns differently than the average the system was designed for, who has gaps in different places than the curriculum assumes, pays the price. Either bored, or lost, or both simultaneously in different subjects, never quite in the right place, never being taught exactly what they need to know, in exactly the way they can best receive it, at exactly the moment they are ready for it. That mismatch between what the system provides and what each individual student actually needs is the deepest problem in education, and it has never been solved, because solving it at scale has never been possible. Until now, that is what I want to talk about today. Not the politics of education reform, not the funding debates, the specific thing that is changing. That makes the deepest problem in education, for the first time in history, actually solvable. Stay with me, because this is one of those changes where the implications run deeper than most people have started to think. Let me tell you about the best educational experience most people have ever had, the one that actually worked, where they genuinely understood something, where it clicked in a way that stayed, where they left the experience more capable than they entered. For most people, that experience was not a classroom. It was a person, a mentor, a tutor, a parent who happened to be exceptionally good at explaining things, a coach, someone who knew them well enough to meet them where they were, who understood what they already knew, who could see where their understanding broke down, who could explain the same thing 3 different ways until one of them landed, who had infinite patience with the same question asked for the 4th time, who could tell when frustration meant push harder and when it meant approach differently, who genuinely cared whether this specific person understood, not whether the class average moved. That kind of education has always been the most effective form available. Every educator knows this. Every parent who has watched a child struggle in a classroom and then suddenly understands something when a tutor explained it differently knows this. The research is not ambiguous. One-on-one tutoring produces dramatically better outcomes than classroom instruction for almost every student, in almost every subject. This is known, has been known for decades, and has not changed how most students learn, because one-on-one tutoring from a knowledgeable human requires something that has never existed at scale. Enough knowledgeable humans, available to enough students, at a cost that enough families can access. That constraint has never been solved. It is being solved now. Here is what ChatGPT's educational capability actually is. Not the marketing version, not the demo version, what it actually does, when used correctly. For learning, it is a patient, infinitely available, deeply knowledgeable, genuinely adaptive, one-on-one educational presence that meets you exactly where you are. Not where the curriculum assumes you should be, where you actually are, with what you actually know, and what you actually do not. When you tell it what you are trying to learn, it does not launch into a textbook explanation. It asks what you already know. It finds the edge of your current understanding, and it starts from there. When you get something wrong, it does not just tell you the right answer. It tries to understand why you got it wrong, what assumption you were making, what gap in your understanding produced this particular error, and it addresses that gap, specifically, not generically. When one explanation does not land, it tries another, then another, from a different angle, using a different analogy, with a different example, with the patience of something that has no other students waiting, no end to the period, no frustration accumulating, no diminishing willingness to explain again, and it remembers. Not just within a session, across sessions, building a model of what you understand, what you are working toward, where you consistently struggle, what kinds of explanations work for you, what kinds of questions help you think more clearly. That model improves every time you use it, and the education it provides improves with it. Here is the moment that convinced me this changes everything. A student described using ChatGPT to learn organic chemistry, a subject with a notoriously high failure rate, a subject that has ended medical careers before they began, a subject where students routinely describe spending hundreds of hours and still feeling like they do not understand what is happening at a fundamental level. This student had spent weeks in lectures, weeks reading the textbook, weeks doing problem sets, and still felt like she was memorizing reactions without understanding why they happened. She opened ChatGPT and described exactly where her understanding broke down. Not generically, specifically. She understood that electrons moved, but she did not understand why they moved the way they did, what governed the direction, what made one movement favorable and another not. ChatGPT did not give her a textbook answer. It asked her a question, a specific question about a much simpler system, one she already understood, and walked her from that simple system, through a series of questions, to the principle that governed the more complex one, not by telling her the principle, by guiding her to discover it herself, through her own reasoning. Guided by exactly the right questions, in one session, she understood something that weeks of conventional study had not produced. Not because ChatGPT is magic, because it did what the best human tutors do. It found where she was, and walked her from there, to where she needed to go. Using questions rather than explanations, her own reasoning rather than received knowledge. That is not a story about AI replacing teachers. That is a story about genuine education, finally being available to someone who needed it, at the moment she needed it, in the form she needed it. Here is the implication that I think is most significant and most underappreciated. This is the first time in human history that high-quality, personalized education has been available regardless of where you were born, regardless of what your parents could afford, regardless of the quality of the schools in your area, regardless of whether you live in a city with good tutors or a rural area where the nearest expert in what you need is hours away. The student in a well-funded suburban school district with access to excellent teachers and a family that can afford tutoring when she needs it has always had a significant educational advantage over the student in an underfunded district with overcrowded classrooms and no access to personalized support. That gap has always produced different outcomes in test scores, in college attendance, in career trajectories, in lifetime income, in intergenerational opportunity, and it has been accepted as an unfortunate feature of how education works. Because closing it required resources that were not available. At scale, that constraint is being removed, not gradually, rapidly. The student in the underfunded district now has access to something that is in many ways superior to the best tutoring money could previously buy, available at any hour, on any device, for the cost of an internet connection, or in many cases for free. That is not a small change. That is potentially one of the most significant equalizations of opportunity in human history. And it is happening right now, not in some future year when the technology matures. Now, here is how the learning relationship actually works, when it is used well, not as a question-answering machine, as a genuine learning partner. The first thing it does is establish where you are. Before anything else, it asks questions to find the actual edge of your understanding. Not the edge you think you are at, the actual edge. Because these are often different. Students consistently overestimate their understanding of things they have encountered and underestimate their understanding of things they have actually worked through. The diagnostic conversation, the one that establishes where you actually are, is the foundation of everything that follows. Because everything that follows is built from that actual starting point, not an assumed starting point, the actual one. The second thing it does is Socratic engagement. Questions rather than explanations. The best learning happens when you arrive at understanding through your own reasoning, guided by the right questions, rather than when you receive an explanation and accept it. The distinction matters enormously. Understanding you arrive at through your own reasoning is understanding you own. Understanding you receive through explanation is understanding you have borrowed. Understanding evaporates under pressure, under the conditions of an exam, under the conditions of a real situation that requires the knowledge. Owned understanding holds, because it is genuinely yours, built by your own reasoning, not accepted from someone else's. The third thing it does is adaptive difficulty, continuously calibrating the challenge to keep you in the zone where learning happens. Not so easy that there is no cognitive effort. Not so hard that the effort produces nothing but frustration. The zone where you are working at the edge of your capability, where you are reaching slightly further than you currently can reach, and where the reaching builds the capability. This zone is different for every student, and it changes as the student learns. The system tracks both and adjusts continuously. So you are always in the zone where actual learning happens, rather than occasionally passing through it. Here is what this does to the economics of education, and why I think the implications are larger than most people have processed. The traditional model of quality education, where quality means personalized, where personalized means a knowledgeable human adapting to an individual student's specific needs, has always been expensive. $100 an hour tutors, private schools with small class sizes, elite universities with enough resources to provide genuine individual attention. These things cost what they cost because they require what they require. Human time, knowledgeable human time applied individually to individual student at individual moments of need. ChatGPT breaks that economics completely, not by reducing quality, by removing the constraint that made quality expensive. The constraint was not knowledge. Knowledge can be stored and transmitted cheaply. The constraint was availability. The availability of a knowledgeable person to an individual student at the individual moment when that student needed help. That availability has never scaled. Until now. Now the availability is infinite. The knowledge is vast. The patience is unlimited. The personalization is genuine. And the cost is negligible compared to what equivalent human tutoring has always cost. That is not an incremental improvement in the economics of education. That is a structural transformation. Here is what I think will happen over the next decade, not in theory, based on the direction of what is already happening. The role of human teachers will evolve, not disappear, evolve, toward the things that human teachers provide that AI cannot provide. Genuine human relationship. The experience of being seen by another person who cares. The modeling of intellectual character, what it looks like to be curious, to struggle productively, to persist through difficulty, to find genuine meaning in understanding something hard, the social environment of learning alongside peers, the experience of belonging to a community of people engaged in the same endeavor. These things matter. They are not incidental to education. They are central to what education is for, and they are things that AI cannot provide. What AI can provide, and what will increasingly free human teachers to provide the things only humans can provide, is the personalized knowledge transmission, the patient explanation, the adaptive challenge, the continuous assessment of where each individual student actually is, the things that currently consume most of a teacher's time and energy, and that AI can do as well or better, at scale. The human teacher who is no longer spending all of her energy on knowledge transmission, because the AI is handling that, can spend all of her energy on the genuinely human parts of teaching, the relationship, the mentorship, the character modeling, the community building, the things that matter most, and that have always been crowded out by the demands of managing a classroom of 30 students with 30 different needs, all receiving the same instruction, at the same pace. Here is what I want you to take away. Not as someone who works in education, as someone who is learning something right now, or who has children who are learning, or who is trying to develop skills that will matter in the world, being built. The tool that is now available for learning is genuinely different from anything that has existed before. Not better in a marginal sense, different in a categorical sense, in the way that the best one-on-one tutoring from the world's most patient and knowledgeable expert, available at any hour, on any subject, calibrated to your specific understanding, is different from sitting in a classroom of 30 students, receiving instruction designed for the average of those 30 students. That difference has always existed, and has always been inaccessible to most people. It is now accessible. The question is whether you are using it. Not occasionally, not for simple things. For the genuine learning challenges in your life. The subjects you have always wanted to understand. The skills you have been meaning to develop. The domains where you know your understanding is weaker than it should be. Those are the places to bring this. Not as a place to get quick answers, as a genuine learning partner that will meet you where you are, walk you to where you need to go, at the pace you actually need, with the patience that has never before been available, for free, whenever you need it. That is what has changed. And it changes more than education. It changes who gets to understand things deeply, who gets to develop genuine expertise, who gets access to the intellectual tools that have always been reserved for the privileged few. That democratization, if it happens the way it can happen, is one of the most significant things that will occur in this generation. And it is available right now, not in the future now. The only question is whether you use it.